So now we'll have another keynote by Piers, CEO of Radix, who will talk about identity.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Piers Ridyard. I am the CEO of Radix. I run the development company that's responsible for building Radix, the public ledger. And Radix is a solution to a problem that we stated a long time ago, which is crypto. Today, the crypto experience for users, developers, and entrepreneurs is pretty damn shocking. If you look at other industries, things like SpaceX, things like Tesla, they had to rethink the entire stack of what they were creating from a technology point of view to be able to make their industry viable. That's essentially what we're doing with Radix. So the main crypto challenges are split into three. On the user side, the average crypto user finds self-custody relatively terrifying. They find it very difficult to interact with decentralized applications. Hacks, scams, and fees are very common. It's very common for people to lose all of their money. And you see that result in DeFi bounce rates. When people go to DeFi protocol websites, there's about a 95% bounce rate of people going from, I'm interested in this, to not actually putting their money in. On the developer side, for the average developer, smart contract developing is pretty terrifying. The chance of getting hacked or exploited is very high. It's about $6 billion of smart contract hacks have happened in the last 3 years. And that's resulted in there only being about 30,000 full-time Web3 and crypto developers. And for entrepreneurs, it's equally terrifying. Your DApp might get exploited, your users might get exploited, you have regulatory uncertainty, and you have a very high degree of risk in building your business. So what Radix did is we started from scratch. Instead of taking the EVM, instead of taking another stack, we basically built the entire stack based on what we see is necessary within the industry. So at the top, we have the developer ecosystem. Below that, we have the Radix wallet, which is a wallet that we built ourselves from the ground up, specifically around our DeFi stack. We have Scripto and the Radix engine. Scripto is our programming language based on Rust. And the Radix engine is an entirely new environment that enshrines a bunch of the things that are done by smart contracts today directly into the ledger, making them much more secure. And then below that, we have Cerberus, which is our scalability consensus algorithm. On the other side, we have Instapass and IDOS, which allows us to bring Web3 identities onto the Radix network. We have Instabridge, which is a crypto payment rails and fiat bridging system. And we have Exosphere, which is a DeFi trading and arbitrage system. So the way I think about this is Radix isn't doing one thing to solve these problems. It's building everything together and in a complete stack to work out what's necessary to actually create mainstream adoption. So we launched the Radix wallet back in September of last year. And this was reimagining the idea of what it meant as a user experience for crypto. So the first thing is you can see here is you have a completely human-readable transaction. And this is actually the transaction you're submitting to the ledger. This isn't an interpreted transaction. This is the instructions that you're putting directly to the ledger. You're saying, I am presenting a badge here, and I'll be talking more about how identity fits into this. I am withdrawing this much money from my account. I'm not giving an infinite approval for spending from my account. I'm only saying this 500 XRD. I can see what app I'm interacting with. I'm interacting with the Megaswap app here, and I can see what I'm going to get back, and I can customize the limits that I expect to have from that. So I can actually put an invariance into the command and say, if this doesn't return this much of this asset, I don't want it to succeed. If you compile, from Radix's approach, human-readable transactions, secure accounts with multi-sig, no custodians and no seed phrases, and mobile-first Web3 design. Everything is based on the mobile phone. On the regular L1 approach, blind signing transactions, disappearing of funds, poor customer experience. Seed phrases, as everyone knows here, seed phrases are difficult and dangerous to use. And desktop-first design generally pervades amongst the industry at the moment when it comes to interacting with DeFi applications. So if you look at something like MetaMask, and you can see how difficult it is to understand what you're doing, versus something like Radix, where you can see exactly what's happening at every step. On the developer front, we created Scripto, which makes it much, much easier to build things like Uniswap, to build things like Aave, and much more secure. You can see, I mean, lines of code are not the best way of describing it, but you can see the difference between Uniswap and Radix. And that's already had 48,000 downloads from our Scripto repository of the programming language. Ultimately, we are seeing multiple developers coming forwards and saying that this is the best possible environment that they have ever built in, and we're seeing a lot of traction as a result of getting new developers into crypto for the first time. So not starting with Solidity makes it much easier for people to build when they feel more secure about what it is that they're building and deploying. So what about identity? So ultimately, our thesis is that Web3 isn't just digital assets. Web3 is actually digital assets and digital identity. But the way that it's kind of implemented doesn't really map to what the real world, how real-world identity works at the moment. At the moment, when you think about Web2 identity or you think about real identity, you are you, and then you have multiple identities associated with you. You could have a relatively pseudonymous identity for logging into a website where you say, hey, this is my email address and this is my password. You could have a slightly more in-depth one where you have something that you remember about yourself, your mother's maiden name or something like that. You could have some authorization, a membership card or something like that, that makes it more easy for you to access a specific business or a specific institution. Or you could go all the way to proving something about yourself, some credential like your passport or your SIM, an SMS or something like that. Mapping that to Web3 is kind of interesting at the moment, because at the moment we only have one paradigm. Essentially, your private key is your proof for all of these, and then what is in your account proves that you have that permission. So if you want to log into a website, it's a private key. If you want to prove you're still the same person, it's a signature with a private key on your blockchain account. If you want to prove you are authorized to a special dApp, again, it's a private key signing something in your account. The problem with that is that identity and what you own are not the same thing. You have a separate concept here of who I am and what I own. And in Web3, we just go, what I own is who I am. That actually makes it difficult for when you're thinking about logging into things and when you're thinking about wanting to access stuff with multiple different accounts. So on Radix, we've separated these out into 4 different concepts. The first is personas. This is something that you're able to present off ledger and prove that you own on ledger, but present off ledger the information to be able to log into a website. You can think of this as a little bit like passkeys, but completely decentralized and without needing Google or Apple as the backbone. We have access controllers, which allow you to prove you're the same person, and I'll go through each of these in turn. So, when you connect your Radix wallet, what you can see here is you can see that the first thing it's asking me to do is associate a persona. This persona is essentially the identity that you're presenting to the website and saying, hey, I'm Radmat in this instance. Or I could be presenting my more official identity and saying, hey, I'm Radix Works Official. This is my identity. This is separate from what I own in my accounts. This is who I'm saying I am to the website or the application that I'm interacting with. Once you've done that, you can then associate accounts with it. And I could associate one, or I could associate several. It doesn't really matter. You have separated out the concept of who I am versus what I own. The next thing you have is this concept of access controllers, which proves you are still the same person. And so an access controller is something that requires some form of authentication, where you're able to prove, hey, I own the control of this account. So instead of just saying, I want you to associate these accounts, I'm now proving that I own these accounts as well. But again, separating out the concept of identity from ownership. This can be done in the wallet via Face ID, or via an extra factor like YubiKey, or via Ledger, or any of these kind of things. Next, you have this concept called badges. And badges are something that can be flashed in transaction time that prove that you have an extra aspect of authentication. So when we were looking at the previous example of a transaction manifest on Radix, you could see that I was flashing my sophisticated or accredited investor badge. In this case, I'm flashing a Gumball Club badge, which gives me a discount to Gumball tokens that I'm buying. This badge sits in my wallet as a separate concept inside the wallet that I can see all of the badges that I have that allow me to have things. So, for example, if I've joined a club, I may have a club badge. If I've got a sophisticated investor badge, I may have a sophisticated investor badge. All of these things I can flash at transaction time when I'm interacting with something, and I can choose whether or not I'm presenting it to the application at the point as I'm interacting with the application. And then the last thing here is DID badges and verifiable credentials. So DID badges and verifiable credentials add this concept of the Radix wallet holding off-ledger information that can be passed across to an application, which can be verified against an on-ledger primitive that doesn't reveal any information within it intrinsically. So within the Radix wallet, you hold your VC data, your verifiable credential data. That could be my full name, my date of birth, my country of origin, my sophisticated investor status, something like that. And then I can pass that across to the app in real time at the same time as I'm presenting my DID badge, which verifies that those credentials that I'm passing across are still valid, but doesn't say anything about the user on ledger, which means that you're able to maintain user privacy while still being able to pass across all of the information that may be necessary for sophisticated financial applications. Ultimately, this allows us to create a full stack for digital assets and digital identity. The end state for this is thinking about what's necessary for OpenFi to go mainstream. And we don't think it's just on-ledger primitives. We think it's a combination of on-ledger and off-ledger primitives. But the complexity that we continually see within the crypto space is that the whole stack isn't designed together. You don't design the full SDK around this idea that identity is a primitive that is necessary to enable full stack applications that can work within compliant environments, that can work within environments that have very, very granular requirements for control around things like geography, around things like investor suitability. And so as a result, this all went into our full stack thinking. And this is why we built everything from the top to the bottom, because our view is that we can only make applications like we've been talking about today in the OpenFi space if you're thinking holistically about everything that needs to be there for the ability to deliver this kind of functionality to the end user in a way that isn't confusing and isn't terrifying. That's everything from me. Thank you very much.